demonetization has got a legal sanction from the Supreme Court today. A clutch of petitions had demanded that the top court examine the process and the way that demonetization was carried out. We, of course, all remember demonetization, where all of a sudden at 8 p.m. an announcement was made which deemed all 500 rupee and 1000 rupee notes illegal. What followed was several weeks of chaos, with people lining up to get money from the banks and to exchange their notes. Now, was all of this done the correct way? Was the action of demonetization legal? That was the question before the bench today. And a 5-judge bench of the Apex Court voted 4-1 in favor of that question, saying it found no flaw in the decision-making process of the government, which led to an immediate ban of 500 and 1000 rupee notes on November 8th, 2016. There was also one dissenting judgment which deemed that it was done in an illegal manner, but the intentions of the government were correct. This dissenting judgment also questioned the role of the board of the RBI, asking what they were doing at this point. Now, the fact that the Supreme Court has said demonetization was legal will definitely come as a big relief to the centre, to the Modi government, but it's also time to ask the question that demonetization was legal, was it successful? Did it actually achieve all the goals that it set out to, whether it is a huge revenue bump up of 3 lakh crore rupees for the central government, turning India into a cashless economy, removing corruption, black money, terrorism? Did all of that actually happen at the end of the day? Nevertheless, it has given an opportunity to the BJP to say that they were completely justified in demonetization. Listen in to some of the responses coming today.
ये पूरी नीति टेरर फंडिंग, फेक करेंसी को रोकने के लिए और आपके मनी लॉन्ड्रिंग एक्सेट्रा, ब्लैक मार्केटिंग को रोकने के लिए की गई थी, और ये उद्देश्य सही है और गवर्नमेंट ये पॉलिसी डिसीजन ले सकती है, उसको लेने का अधिकार है। दूसरी बात जो कही गई थी कि आरबीआई से कोई कंसल्टेशन नहीं हुआ, बाकी नहीं हुआ, कोर्ट ने उसको भी रिजेक्ट किया और कहा कि आरबीआई से कंसल्टेशन हुआ था। स्वयं आरबीआई ने कोर्ट के सामने अपने वकील के द्वारा हुआ कि एक कंसल्टेशन हुआ था।
जो 1934 का आरबीआई एक्ट है, उसका सेक्शन 26(2) यह फैसला सिर्फ उस पर केंद्रित था कि उसकी कोई अवहेलना नहीं हुई, उसका पालन हुआ गया। अलावा इसके माननीय सर्वोच्च न्यायालय ने न इस पर कोई टिप्पणी की कि क्या नोटबंदी से आतंकवाद कम हुआ, क्या नोटबंदी से जो करेंसी सर्कुलेशन में थी, काला धन सर्कुलेशन में था, क्या वो कम हुआ। इस सब पर कहीं कोई एक शब्द भी इस निर्णय में नहीं है।
All right, to speak more on this, I am joined today by R. Gandhi, Maithili Bhusramat, Sanjay Hegde and Madhavan Narayanan. Welcome to all of you and thank you so much for speaking with us. Let me begin with the view of Maithili Bhusramat, consulting editor, ET Now. Maithili, do you think today, if we ask the key question of whether demonetization was a success, was it a good idea or a bad idea, that of course was not in the purview of the courts. But do you think in hindsight, there has been some justification for demonetization after the court's view?
I think one of the more important point to be noted here in the judgment is that it lays down a very important principle, which I think will hold for the future also, is that it clearly lays down that the judiciary has only a limited judicial review in matters of economic policy. Now, this is very, very important because we've often heard the argument that you do have judicial overreach, you do have judicial interference in matters that lie purely within the realm of the executive or the legislature. So this time the judgment 4:1, and here even the dissenting judge, Nagaratna, has clearly agreed that as far as judicial intervention is concerned, the scope for judicial intervention in matters of economic policy is limited. It cannot supplant the views of experts. I quote, "The records do not show any flaw in the use of decision-making powers of the government. There was prior consultation that we can, argue about subsequently, but the most important takeaway is that the judiciary clearly accepts in a constitutional bench that there is only limited scope for judicial review in matters of economic policy. And that, I think, is of far greater significance than the limited point of whether demonetization was a success or not. And here I may add that I don't think there's a single legislation or executive decision which one can call an unqualified success. There will always be cases where something slips through. You can never have 100% success. So on this, I think that.
But you know, Maithili, the reason I posed that question is because many have argued and have said that demonetization was the exact opposite of an unqualified success. It was an unqualified disaster. That is the argument that has been made for a while. And the reason that this question is important is because today, in the context of what the Supreme Court is saying, there's an opportunity to say that, well, demonetization was, after all, a good idea. Look, it was legal, everything was kosher.
See, it's all a question of which way you want to look at it. Is the glass half full or glass half empty? Take a simple case of the anti-dowry law. Is it an unqualified success? Certainly not. But at the same time, it has made a difference. So certainly to the extent that digitization certainly has proceeded far faster because of demonetization, one has to hand that part of it. Yes, currency in circulation is again up, but as I said, it all depends on which way you want to look at it. So I think the importance of this judgment, as I said, is not the specific issue of demonetizing success or not, but the larger question of judiciary finally accepting that there is limited scope for the judiciary to intervene in matters of economic policy.
Mr. R. Gandhi also with us, former RBI Deputy Governor. Mr. Gandhi, great to have you on the show. What also came through the petitions and the course of the hearing, of course the judgment as well, is the role of the Reserve Bank of India and the board of the Reserve Bank of India in all of this. Today, it seems technically that the idea was initiated from the Reserve Bank of India. There were consultations for several months, the government has claimed. But if you see, the dissenting orders also questioned the role of the board. Do you think these are very important questions which come into place in terms of checks and balances in our system?
See, for any public policy decisions which the Reserve Bank has to take, the initiation or initial trigger can come from any party, any stakeholder. It could be ordinary public also, it could be government, it could be technicians, it could be economists. Any and everybody has the right to suggest something to the Reserve Bank of India, and Reserve Bank in its wisdom will go through those suggestions and come to conclusions what need to be done, etc. So that way, from where the trigger comes, it is immaterial. It is whether the Reserve Bank is applying its mind on the questions raised or on the suggestions given by any stakeholder. That has been done. As it has been clearly mentioned that there has been long period of consultation between Reserve Bank and the government on this particular issue, demonetization. So that should give us the confidence that it is not just rushed into any conclusion. So that I would hold that public policy will always have pros and cons. Pros and cons may have to be discussed, debated, depending upon its seriousness, whether it should be kept confidential or it should be done publicly. Those calls certainly the public authorities will be taking. And based on that, the decisions will be finally be taken. On that, the Supreme Court has endorsed that particular way, that it has recognized that there have been consultations, and each party has within their own remit of the law, whether they recommend or not recommend other thing, that is based on their wisdom.
Okay, the question still remains on whether it was a good idea or not. Sanjay Hegde, you know, when we talk about demonetization 6 years down the line, in terms of actual impact, what the Supreme Court has done is going to make no difference to what has already happened, right? What's done is done. And now it's a matter of debate and sometimes politics on whether it was good or bad. What do you think is the lasting impact and the implication of the Supreme Court judgment today?
Well, I was listening to the previous speaker, Maithili, who said that the court has, for the first time, laid out that, you know, in economic policy that the court will not intervene. I think that's a wrong statement to make. The court had this position was held by the court very long back in the bearer bonds case. You may remember that in Indira Gandhi's time, the bearer bonds came, which allowed a lot of black money to be whitened. That was challenged by a gentleman called R.K. Garg, and in R.K. Garg's case itself, the proposition was laid down that in economic matters, the courts would normally have a hands-off approach. It has been reiterated today. As far as the dissent is concerned, the dissent was with regard to the procedure to be adopted, and the dissent felt that Parliament should have been consulted and that there should have been legislation, that this could not have been done by executive action, but had to be plenary power of Parliament had to be invoked. That is the kind of argument which also prevailed with the UK Supreme Court in the Brexit case. You must remember that in Brexit, the government of the day sought to give in to treaty obligations, saying treaty obligations would be the supreme law of the land, and they were only reworking a treaty. The UK Supreme Court said, no, you need parliamentary legislation. And thereafter, another government came in and passed things through Parliament. So, as far as the wisdom of the decision is concerned, the Supreme Court is not the appropriate forum. Whether it be in this case or in ordinary administrative law, the merits of the decision is not normally the remit of the judges. The modality, the process, due compliance with all requirements of the law, that is what the judges check for. And that's what they have done. And 4 judges say that it is compliant, 1 judge says no.
That's fine, Mr. Hegde. What I also want to understand is what are the implications in this for further policy statements? I mean, does this lay down that at the end of the day, the executive has the supreme right for policy? In a case of something like demonetisation, they couldn't have taken it to Parliament because secrecy was a key part of actually implementing it. And that gets now reiterated today, isn't it?
It is not also correct to say that now there is a sort of blank check left to future parliaments and future prime ministers to get into demonetisation on a whim. The process that has been adopted this time has been subject to a stress audit, and one of the judges has said that, look, you must take Parliament also into consultation. I hope that there are no demonetizations of this kind in the future, or no politician contemplates it. I doubt that any politician will seriously contemplate it for at least a few decades now. But if somebody were to contemplate it, I think that the process would be much more rigorous and with the benefit of this Supreme Court judgment.
Okay, Madhavan Narayanan, on the political side, it has obviously given the BJP an opportunity to say that we were completely justified. They've in fact asked the Congress to apologize for all of the opposition. The Congress party has gone on and, highlighted the dissenting order. They've seen more merit in that and said, what about all the troubles that people went through? Do you think that this has any political implication at all? Because demonetization didn't harm the Modi government in any way politically.
Yes, I think, Tamanna, there are within this case, demonetization as it is has moral, economic, and constitutional and legal arguments. But economically, it has definitely failed because all the money that was supposed to be caught didn't come back. But let's get the facts and then get the politics. The facts are that demonetization failed because neither in terms of black money evasion, nor in terms of shell companies that were supposed to be tracked when Mr. Arun Jaitley was alive, happened. So there is, economically, this has certainly been a disaster because in the backdrop of non-performing assets and a slowdown in the economy, this only added to the problems. But BJP has successfully made it a political one and it continues to do so, and that is where the crux of the issue lies. It has done so by doing 3 things. First, it is making it, it has shifted goalposts. Instead of talking about tax evasion and black money as a core objective, they have talked about digitization. They talked about shell companies. In the first year, there were lots of shell companies holding up, but no money accrued to the exchequer significantly in a manner. So shell companies can be opened and closed with ease, so it doesn't make any difference. But in terms of optics, they have shifted the goalposts first to terror financing, then to digitization, and shifting the goal. And they have won the optics using today's Supreme Court judgment as of today. But let's not forget that they even won general elections in the middle, making this whole debate irrelevant. And if at all there was a legal argument in favor of, as Justice Nagaratna said, in favor of the RBI Act, being violated through demonetization, then the RBI should have advised it. And if it was not there in the RBI consultation, that's a matter for Congress to hit upon, which it doesn't seem to have done. Most important of all, the optics that the Supreme Court has the authority to pronounce a verdict on the right and wrong of demonetization is being used brilliantly by BJP, but not for people like us who look at the details. From a general public brand building perspective, they are running with the ball. But actually speaking, as Maithili Busarma pointed out, this is only a judicial argument. This is not an economic, political, social argument at all. But the BJP is successfully packaging its own message very well on the top of the judgment. So the problem lies in the optics and the political messaging as far as the Congress and opposition parties are concerned. And last but not the least, let me say this whole petition seems like a farce to me, because even if there was a legal validity and ordinance required, an ordinance could have been issued by the Modi government with its majority, which was comfortable in parliament. So therefore, this whole thing is, the only thing it does is to raise the pitch in the public sphere and generate political conversations. And within that, I must say the BJP has an upper hand, because it has also managed to sell somewhere along the way the message that Modi did this as an act of courage to uphold his promise of cracking down on black money. So this whole Teflon coating of Modi has come into play to help the BJP. But let me be blunt. I never had any doubt that the Supreme Court would uphold the demonetization. But let me be equally blunt in saying that the demonetization was an economic disaster, a social pain, and this is something that for some reason doesn't seem to have translated in electoral politics at all. So BJP deserves what.
So let's look at whether it worked or not. We have now sort of clarified, and what we have achieved so far in this debate to clarify that what the courts looked at is whether the Modi government was well within its right to do something like demonetization. Did they follow the right process? 4 out of 5 judges says yes, they did. Now let's ask whether it worked or not. What did it want to achieve, and did it finally achieve it? I actually started by asking Maithili that question, so let me come to now Mr. R. Gandhi. If the, I would say, biggest plus point of demonetization today is digital payments, and we have taken leaps and bounds, a surge in digital payments. Did we need demonetization to achieve it? Would you see our adoption of digital payments right now as a result of demonetization, Mr. Gandhi?
For encouraging digital payments, one need not have indulged in demonetization, I agree. But that's one of the byproducts, positive byproducts of the demonetization. So to that extent, it is definitely welcome. Any kind of impetus that is coming to digitization, it is always welcome. Like that, even COVID-19 also had given impetus for digital payments. Does it mean that COVID-19 for that reason we'll bring it? Not so. Similarly, so that's that apart. The demonetization's original objectives, as declared at that time, was to tackle black money, terror funding, and counterfeiting. So counterfeiting was a very important element of the objectives, and because at that time the then existent series had a large-scale counterfeiting. So that has been, by bringing in completely new series, we could bring up a stop to that kind of counterfeiting. That is another achievement, definitely, which has been experienced. So that way, we can definitely debate. As I said earlier, also public policy will always have plus minus.
So what did it achieve? I'm just reading a report of the National Crime Control Bureau, which said that counterfeit notes across the country in 2016, which was seized, had a face value of 245 crore rupees. But this has continued through the time. Counterfeit notes have continued through the time, and it's not like the problem has gone away. So today, if we were to take stock, that did we
point
need
is
demonetization and was it a success? What would you say, sir?
Now, point is not about whether counterfeiting continues or not. It is the quality of the counterfeiting. That is what is very important, because ordinary crude counterfeiting, just like photocopying with a kind, that kind of thing happens today. That we have seen quite a bit of counterfeiting. That's not the counterfeiting I am talking about here. Here, the at that time, the perfection or the high quality counterfeit notes which we had seen, that kind of counterfeiting has not happened in the new series. That's the point I am making, because that has been was a very big problem at that time to tackle that kind of counterfeiting. That has been effectively cut.
Okay. Maithili, in your view, what did demonetization achieve? And in hindsight, was it worth it? Since there have been reports after reports that say it did set back the Indian economy. We were already in a weaker position pre-COVID, in large part because of demonetization.
Well, it certainly did hurt the economy, especially the informal sector. But it certainly wasn't the economic disaster that Madhavan has spoken about, simply because it achieved two big things. As Gandhi has said, apart from the impetus it gave to digitization, the biggest change that it made was in terms of formalization of the economy. The improvement that we've seen in GST collections, I would say, is partly because of the greater formalization of the Indian economy. And even though counterfeiting, as Gandhi says, will never completely disappear, the quality of the notes is far superior now. It becomes that much more difficult to counterfeit. So overall, I would not call it a disaster. It was not a great success, yes, and there was social pain. But whenever you do these kind of things, there's bound to be social pain. I think the bigger problem was with the way it was implemented. I think we were not sufficiently prepared to deal, the banks and the RBI also, were not sufficiently geared up to deal with the problems. It took some time. So it did cause a great deal of pain to the individuals. And to just repeat get back to what Mrs. Gade said. Yes, it was right. I was stand corrected that during Mrs. Gandhi's bearer bonds case, the Supreme Court had said, but periodically the Supreme Court has in fact very often gone against its own judgment, as we saw in the case of 2G spectrum auction, where it said that no, it should not have been done on the first come, first serve basis. It has to be done by auction for 2G. Again, in the case of privatization, the Supreme Court has repeatedly entertained petitions against privatization. So even though the Supreme Court had in the past laid down that the scope for limited judicial review only was there in economic policy, this is a reiteration and very clearly said. So that was the point I just wanted to get back to. Yes, Mr. Hegde is right. I stand corrected, but this is an important reiteration.
We're coming to the situation of whether it was worth it. Let me put it very simply. In hindsight, was it worth it? What's done is done. The Supreme Court judgment also makes that clear. They say the way it was done is legal. 4 out of 5 judges at least say it was legal. Today, the ruling party gets to say that, listen, it was all fine and whoever was opposing us was wrong. But was it actually worth it at the end of the day? Did it really push us at a faster pace towards formalization and digital payments? Sanjay Hegde, your view on this?
Well, that is more the law of unintended consequences. You might think that you are going across with one objective. Some other objectives have been met. One of the arguments in court was that you could not unscramble a scrambled egg. Essentially, the government set out to make an omelette, but then it ended up with scrambled eggs and is now passing it off, saying after all the eggs are eggs. That is what is happening. And yes, Madhavan is right. It's being brilliantly marketed. Now, as far as the politics of it is concerned, it's an entirely different spin. Courts do not participate in politics. And court decisions sometimes become the starting point of politics. You remember that in the US, the abortion decision, that had its own political impact the other way. And the Democrats who were possibly losing that election managed to hold on to their Senate majority. Sometimes the fact that a court has, after a length of time, said that there's nothing wrong with technically with the decision, is unlikely to have too much of a political impact, in my opinion.
Last question to you, Madhavan. In hindsight, we have managed to push digital payments in a phenomenal way. I mean, no one can deny the success of UPI, etc. There's an SBI report which says 80% of all payments in the economy right now are digital payments. And they say that by FY27, this will increase to 88%. That has happened in part because of demonetization. There was no other choice.
In part, most certainly, Tamanna, but not in whole, because as Mr. Gandhi pointed out, COVID-19 might have done more to digitization of or use of mobile wallets than demonetization. Let me also point out that GST and its automation to software, in my opinion, doesn't have any link with demonetization, because computerization and internet have been a steady progress for the past 3 decades, and it might have hastened something by a few months here or there. I don't think credit can go to demonetization. Net, if Lord Macaulay introduced English into India because to administer the native, and today English language helps India become an IT or software superpower, I cannot argue that British colonialism was good for India. So, but having said that, let me say that the unintended consequences of demonetization seem to have worked better than the intended ones, whether it is terror financing or counterfeiting or checking terror finance, counterfeiting or black money. To that extent, I think Mr. Modi's horoscope seems to have worked very well for demonetization. So congratulations to him.
You know, one of the earlier points of demonetization or reasons being talked about was to remove a massive revenue grabber for the government of 3 lakh crore, which would extinguish the fiscal deficit. That's what was being said in the early hours after the announcement of demonetization in the first few days. The goalposts did shift consistently. It was some days of real trouble for the Aam Aadmi. There was no doubt about that. Those long queues outside banks will be remembered. But in the end of the day, was it legally done? That's the question. There's a lot of policy decisions that governments might make. Some might be complete bloopers and blunders. Some might be great. That's not the question. The question today was it legally and properly done? Well, the answer 4:1 has been yes. Thank you to all of you for joining us today on the India Development Debate. We'll take a quick break, but we're back with a lot more.